Dear learners, we are back in the classroom. We are in P7 Science and the topic is light energy. Remember, in the previous topics and classes, we said that energy is ability to do work, and we talked about different forms of energy where we talked about kinetic energy, potential energy, chemical energy, heat energy, sound energy, electrical energy, and so on. So now for today, for now, we are on light energy. So let's talk about it. So as you can see, light is the form of energy. Light is the form of energy that stimulates the sense of seeing. To stimulate is to encourage something into action or to incite or to induce. So what enables us to see is this light. So remember, we have the sense organs which are called the eyes and the sense called the seeing. So we are able to see things around us because light gets reflected into our eyes. Then after being reflected, then we see those things from where that light is coming from. So light is the form of energy that enables us to see. It stimulates the sense of seeing. Without light, the sense of seeing is inactive. It does not work because we are not able to see. So that is what we call light energy. So from light energy, we go to sources of light. Sources of light. Sources of light. So when we talk of sources of light, simply we mean sources of light. These are objects. These are objects. You can say objects or you can say bodies. These are objects which produce or emit or give out light. So when we talk of sources of light, that is what we mean. Objects which produce or emit or give out light. But when you are answering, don't use all those. You may say that these are objects which produce light, or these are objects which emit light, or these are objects which give out light. So you don't need to include all those terms. So that is what we mean when we talk of sources of light. So we have different sources of light, and these sources of light are classified into types of sources. So have types of sources of light. Types of sources of light. So there are two types of sources of light. One, we have natural sources of light, and we also have artificial sources of light. So these are the types of sources of light that we have. So we are going to talk about these sources of light. So let us begin with the natural sources of light. Number one, natural sources of light. Natural sources of light. Natural sources of light. So these are objects which produce light naturally. Objects which produce light naturally are what we call natural sources of light. In other words, these are things which are not made by people. These are things which produce light and are not made by people. So those are what we call natural sources of light. They are things which give us light and of which these things are not made by people. They were provided by nature maybe, or were created by God. So those are what we call the natural sources of light. Examples, examples, examples of natural sources of light. We have we have the sun, we have stars, we have erupting volcanoes, erupting volcanoes, have erupting volcanoes. We have living organisms like fireflies. We have fireflies. We also have another living organism called glowworms. So these are examples of natural sources of light. So if you look at all these things, if you have a look at the sun, you know this is the main source of energy in the environment. It was created by God. It is natural. Stars, there are also bodies which are found in the sky. We have erupting volcanoes. So in your SST, you study volcanicity. So during an eruption, light is also seen. The light is produced. Then we have fireflies. These are living organisms. They are normally seen at night because of the way they produce light. Also have, yes, glowworms. These are also living organisms. So fireflies and glowworms, these are living organisms which are sources of light. So those are examples of natural sources of light. So when we talk of this and we don't talk about the moon, you may wonder. So we have moon. Let's have a note. Let's have a note. You may wonder when we talk about the sun, we talk about stars, but we don't talk about the moon. So for the moon, that is a note, is not a source, is not a source of light because it reflects light from the sun. So that is why moon is not a source of light. Yes, however, at night we know that there are some days where we get light, but when we think that, or when we see the moon, we see light coming from it, and we may think that this light is produced by the moon, but it is not the case. Only that the moon is at the angle where it gets light which comes from the sun, then it reflects it onto the earth, and we are able to see light. Yes, so this moon is not a source of light because of that reason. Moon is not a source of light because it reflects light from the sun. So take note of that. So after natural sources of light, we go to the second type of sources of light, which we have called artificial sources of light. Go to artificial sources of light. So artificial sources of light, these man-made. These are man-made objects that produce light. So these are things which produce light, but when they are made by people. So the objects which produce light, which people make to produce light, these are what we call the artificial sources of light. So we may have examples of artificial sources of light. We have torches, we have electric bulbs, we have kerosene lamps, we have hurricane lamps, lamps, hurricane lamps. We also have candles, open fires, etc. So all those are examples of artificial sources of light. So when you look at a torch is made by people. Yes, it is made by people, and then it produces light. Electric bulb, that bulb you see that you use, it might be in a torch, it might be uh, in a lamp holder hang there in your house. When if you use either solar or the hydroelectric power, so you see those bulbs you use, those which are in your houses, yes, those are all called electric bulbs. They are made by people and they are artificial sources of light. Then we have the kerosene lamps. This is a local lamp which is called in most of the local languages in Uganda, which is called tadoba. That is called a kerosene lamp. Then a hurricane lamp, it also uses kerosene, but for it is the source of light is covered with a glass. You know that, rather is covered with glass. Yes, it is covered with glass. It has two handles sideways, then it has another handle on top. So that is what you call a hurricane lamp. Then candles, these ones you know better, open fires. This is like the fire that you set or that you make when you are going to cook. So those are the examples of artificial sources of light. So after that, we go to luminous and non-luminous and non-luminous objects. Luminous and non-luminous objects. So we begin with luminous objects. So let us see. So when we talk of luminous objects, these are objects which produce their own light. So objects which produce their own light are called luminous objects. Things or bodies or objects which don't get light from any other source of light, those are what we call luminous objects. And then these luminous objects, they are also called direct sources of light. They are also called direct sources of light. So if you look at artificial sources of light and natural sources of light, you can see that all these sources of light produce their own light. So in other words, luminous all artificial sources of light and natural sources of light are luminous objects because they produce their own light. So when you are asked to give one example or any or two examples of luminous objects, you either give artificial sources of light or natural sources of light. So we may have a note: all natural and and artificial sources of light are luminous objects. They are luminous objects. They are all luminous objects. Then in luminous objects, we have what we call incandescent objects. Incandescent objects, these are under luminous objects. So for incandescent objects, these are objects which produce light when they are hot. Yes, objects which produce light when they are hot. E.g., we have like the sun, we have like electric bulbs, we have charcoal. Yes, and others you can find them from our lists above. So all in luminous objects, the luminous objects, whether natural or artificial, which produce light when they are hot, they are called incandescent objects. Yes. So for the case you can see, for the case of like fireflies and glowworms, these ones are not incandescent objects because yes, they do not need to be, they produce light when they are not hot. But most of these objects we have listed here in artificial and natural sources of light, most of them produce light or emit light when they are hot, and such objects are called incandescent objects, etc. Yes, sun, electric bulbs, charcoal, and others. The rest, find them from the examples that we have listed above. So now we go to non-luminous. We go to non-luminous objects. Go to non-luminous objects. So non-luminous objects, these are objects which do not produce, I said you can say produce or emit or give out, which do not produce their own light. Non-luminous objects. Non-luminous objects are objects which do not produce their own light. So examples of these objects, e.g., examples of these objects which do not produce their own light, we have like mirrors, we have moon, we also have some planets, so uh mirrors, sorry, mirrors, mirrors, mirrors. So when you look at a mirror, as if it is opposite to any source of light, it can reflect light to a certain place or to somewhere. So you see light coming from the mirror, but it is not that that mirror has produced light, just that mirror has got light or has reflected light which is coming from another source. Then we talked about this moon. Talked about moon. We said that for moon it reflects its light from the sun. Therefore, it is not a source of light. And then, yes, it does not produce its own light, and therefore it is a non-luminous object. Then some planets. There are some planets which are polished, which can also reflect light from other planets or from the sun. Yes, they reflect. Yes, there are some planets which reflect light from the sun. Yes, and you happen to see light as if it is coming from those planets. So those are also called non-luminous objects. So for now, let us stop here. Next time, we shall look at something else. Keep following because we shall cover the whole topic and we begin another one. So please subscribe to this YouTube channel, like, share as we go on with this uh, learning. So thank you.